Unbelievable. If you needed more info as to the racist belief of one, well, Ben Shapiro, look no further. He's calling for the pardon of Derek Chauvin, the man who murdered and was convicted by a jury of his peers of that murder against Mr. George Floyd. Here it is.
If we are issuing pardons, however, there is one person that President Trump should pardon from federal charges forthwith. It would be incredibly controversial, but I think that it's absolutely necessary. That person is Derek Chauvin. President Trump should, in fact, pardon Derek Chauvin. But when it came to BLM, the inciting event for the BLM riots that caused $2 billion in property damage in the United States and set America's race relations on their worst footing in my lifetime, was, in fact, the railroading of Derek Chauvin in the death of George Floyd. The evidence demonstrates that Derek Chauvin did not, in fact, commit murder of George Floyd. George Floyd was high on fentanyl. He had a significant pre-existing heart condition. Talk about delivering pardons. President Trump, I think, should really seriously consider pardoning on federal charges. He can't pardon on state charges Derek Chauvin, who was convicted of the murder of George Floyd. As I say, we will be covering this pretty extensively in the coming weeks. Right now, you should go to pardonderek.com and sign our petition asking President Trump to grant justice to Officer Derek Chauvin.
Now, who is backing the play? Well, Elon Musk, who decided to repost this in solidarity with such an offensive thought. To pardon a man who murdered a black man while being recorded doing so. Sharon, just when you thought it could not go any lower, they figure out how to knock the bottom out of low and go even lower than that. What say you?
These are punks and fools. They're agitators and gaslighters. That's all this is.
What's up, y'all? Gerald here, creator of Gospel Chops and your host for this YouTube channel, back with another video. Now, if you are part of the community and you follow the news much like I do, I need you to take heed to my warning that I'm giving you right now. Do not fall for the okie doke. Do not fall for the banana in the tailpipe. The Democrats are down bad. The lefties are down bad. Donald Trump keeps winning. MAGA keeps winning. The right keeps winning. And Democrats are going to throw anything they can against the wall and see what sticks. And here we have another story where they want to get you all riled up in the community. They want the blackity blacks to feel some kind of way. So what do? They point out a misstep of a Ben Shapiro. Well, this is an unforced error by Ben Shapiro. He did it because he wanted to do it. He did it because that's how he felt. After your issue with Candace Owens, many of the folks in the community, even though they don't agree with Candace, they like to see her disagree with you. So they sided with Candace and saw that you had certain tendencies towards certain people in the Middle East. And they felt a certain way about you and your position. So here you are with a new position. Well, an old position that you decided to bring out now that Donald Trump is number 47. Donald Trump has been in office a little over 6 weeks, and here goes Ben Shapiro saying, Derek Chauvin, police officer who was in charge of the arrest of George Floyd, should be pardoned by President Trump. Well, I just finished watching President Trump in the Oval Office maybe an hour or so ago. One reporter asked Donald Trump about it. He said, I don't know anything about it. I haven't heard anything about it. I don't know what Ben Shapiro is talking about out there in those streets. Well, why is Ben Shapiro talking about it? Because he wants to put pressure on the president. He wants to exert some influence, little of it though he might have. He wants to put his voice out there in the mix, get a few clicks, get a few likes and whatnot. Because Derek Chauvin ain't got much to do with the things that Ben Shapiro has stood for heretofore. However, it's a way to cause controversy. It is a way to stir up consternation. And here goes Ben Shapiro saying that the federal charges, because we all know that Derek Chauvin was convicted of state charges. Ben Shapiro saying the federal charges should be pardoned by President Trump. Well, what good would that do President Trump, knowing that the man is still going to serve prison time, football numbers for state charges? Even if he pardoned him on a federal level, he would still be facing those convictions on a state level. So why would Ben Shapiro insert his voice into this conversation that has pretty much been dead for years. The amount of years that Derek Chauvin has been in prison. And let me say this, y'all. It ain't been easy for Derek Chauvin. He's been beat up. He's been stabbed, shanked. He's been abused in prison. It has not been easy for this man. But we know, based on history, let me say that, because I'm in California, y'all, and I say, hey, if those officers can get off for beating and attempting to actually murder Rodney King and they can walk, well, seems a little unfair that a Derek Chauvin can get 25 years in prison for manslaughter, second degree, third degree murder. And when you look at the toxicology report, some of the stuff, see, this is the thing. Because people say, well, look at the evidence, look at the evidence. Listen, your evidence don't mean anything if you can't get it in court. Go to law school, take an evidence class, you'll learn all about it. If you can't get it in, it doesn't mean anything. It is ineffectual. Don't change nothing. So all these evidential claims that people are saying here on the outside in the outer noise of this case don't mean nothing if the jury don't hear it, if the jury can't consider it. So we have a conviction. Derek Chauvin has been convicted of manslaughter. And I'll tell you, as much as I believe that Derek Chauvin did not murder George Floyd, I watched the video 100 times. And when I look at Derek Chauvin, I say, well, he didn't care whether George Floyd lived or died in that moment. That's what I took from it. That's my opinion, and I'm entitled to it. I assume you tune into this channel to hear my opinion. That's it. Derek Chauvin didn't care whether George Floyd lived or died in that moment. When you saw him go limp, when you saw that urine flow on the pavement, and you saw his body release, you knew that was an issue. If you didn't let up at that point, I have to assume that you didn't care. But that's just me. It's okay. But Ben Shapiro has come out and said, hey, Donald Trump should pardon Derek Chauvin on all federal charges. I disagree.
I'm tired of having fake conversations, so we just have to say this is gaslighting, right? So this guy was convicted by a jury in a state court. So no matter what Donald Trump decides to do, if he issues this federal pardon, he's going to sit in jail. So what's the purpose of it? Why would you go down this line, reopen this wound when it's not going to have any impact whatsoever?
You know, I don't think they know. I mean, you're 100%. What he says is absolutely correct. It's a silly conversation. So the trial we all watched on TV was the state court trial. Right. The way Donald Trump does not, or any president doesn't have the power to pardon anyone in the state court, like he can't pardon himself, and it's only the governor of the state can do that. It's the same thing here. So hypothetically, if Trump did pardon him, what happened was after he gets convicted, he then goes into federal court on civil rights violation and he pleads guilty to 20 years. So, but it runs concurrently at the same time. So if Trump pardons
he's serving the same sentence.
He's still standing.
And what he's doing is, so in the state court case, he was found guilty by a jury. Correct. In federal court, he pled guilty. So he acknowledged and accepted responsibility. So you're going to pardon him despite the fact that he accepted responsibility for something, obviously saying he did it because you have to tell a judge and confirm that you're accepting this plea for a reason, and there's not going to be any impact whatsoever. So other than to gaslight, other than to reopen these wounds, what's the purpose? Why are we having this conversation? Why is Elon Musk joining in and kind of making this a bigger issue?
I mean, quite honestly, because we've gotten to a point where I think they want to incite violence. They want to incite protests so that they have an excuse to invoke what Donald Trump wanted to invoke last time, but was not allowed to do by some members of his cabinet, which is to invoke the Insurrection Act and take more power. And I'm sorry, I know that sounds cuckoo, for Cocoa Puffs, except that we know he tried to do that last time and was stopped by people in his own cabinet. And so this is to create dissension. This is to create animosity. This is to create protests in the streets so that he can go out there and put a stop to it and basically do what he was not allowed to do last time.
Look, I think we can't avoid the racial message. Yep. Right.
Absolutely.
That is the being sent, the dog whistle. And I think it's a lot about dividing people, otherizing people. And just having this conversation is about that, the way that they're treating Latino immigrants. It's about that. It's about making certain white people feel better, more powerful than Black people, Latino people, immigrants, you name it. But, you know,
It is
find
that.
your
I mean,
the group that you can define as other.
I spoke with the brother of George Floyd, Philonise Floyd, who was there on the ground for a very long time. And I just wanted to read a statement. In talking to him, I covered this from the very beginning to the very end, stayed in Minneapolis for about a year and followed the trial and followed the case and was there during the protests. So here's what George Floyd's brother said to me. He said, if the president were to do this, it would hurt us. It is so personal. We saw our brother tortured to death. My niece would have to see him walk freely while her dad is in the ground. If he does this, it will set America back 400 years. The ones pushing for this are trying to remove any power that Black Americans have to get justice. It is disgusting. Why would you do this? Why would you re-injure this family and America? So why is Musk pushing this idea?
I think the good news here is, from my understanding, no one at the White House is entertaining this. There isn't any political advantages strategically for the president to even consider such a thing. Sometimes stuff on social media.
Elon Musk is in the White House.
Well, sometimes I think
he's
what we see
amplifying.
on social media, Sarah, if I'm just being frank, probably should be ignored. I just got to be honest. I think this guy has had his attorneys attempt to appeal, from my understanding.
Yes.
And at every level, they have failed. The justice system appears to have worked the way it was intended to work. I think the White House is right to ignore this, to keep focusing on other things. If Musk wants to put this out here, he owns Twitter, he can do whatever the hell he wants. But from my perspective as a strategist, the White House needs to just ignore this. Nothing good comes from this.
Now, it might make you feel better if the federal charges were dropped. Might make you feel like Donald Trump has done something noble. But when I do a cost-benefit analysis and put myself in the position of a Donald Trump, I say, what is the benefit to you, sir? They've already convinced the blackity blacks in the community that this man was a murderer, despite the toxicology report, despite all the evidence prior to his demise. They've already convinced all the blackity blacks that Derek Chauvin is a murderer. So what good would it do you to buck up against that at this late hour? And I hate to see a man languishing in a prison cell, knowing that after years behind bars, maybe he's done his time. Maybe justice has been served for his carelessness, for his recklessness, for his negligence even. But I don't believe it was murder, y'all. But I also don't believe that Donald Trump has anything to do with this. And for Ben Shapiro to come out and try to dump that in Donald Trump's lap, man, who do you work for? Who is paying you to come out and advocate for things like this and try to stir up trouble? It's going to be enough trouble stirred up with the left against the right, with the blackity blacks getting kicked out of Congress and all kinds of things going on. This is not something that Donald Trump needs on his plate. So I'm glad when the reporter came out just an hour or so ago and said, hey, what do you think about that recommendation of you pardoning Derek Chauvin? Donald Trump said, I ain't heard nothing about it. I don't know nothing about it. Well, I hope you don't hear anything about it, because this is foolishness that some irrelevant podcaster is trying to put on your plate. It's not something that you should be concerned with. It's not something you should even get involved with. Let the blackity blacks and them folks work it out on their own.
White House. And Musk is retweeting this to 319 million people. So he's putting it out there. And when Musk says things, Donald Trump listens. So what do you do about it?
I don't think the president's going to listen to this.
And should we ignore it? Because we're put in a position where, do we ignore this issue of gaslighting, of trying to incite things, and just act like it's not going to happen because there won't be nothing will come of it because he'll still be in jail? Or do we focus on it and try and make it an issue? So now you're putting us in a position to have to decide, do we want to address this or not?
But hold on, let's look at where it's coming.
Because the head of Doge,
someone who spoke at the cabinet meeting, someone who was there yesterday.
We are all driving people to go watch Ben Shapiro right now. We're all driving people. What'd he say? What's going on?
Arthur,
It worked.
with all due respect, he puts these kinds of people in positions of influence. Dan Bongino is now the number 2 guy.
That's your buddy.
No, not my buddy. Believe me, not my buddy. At the FBI, right? Pete Hegseth is running the DOD. I mean, these are all people who you could have said 6 months ago were the same jokers whose job was to go on TV or go on their podcast and get ratings. And now they're in positions of
And he's
influence.
dismantling, he's dismantled the civil rights.
Yeah, Bongino had some.
He has the civil rights department at the DOJ, the departments that would be in charge of investigating cases like this at a federal level have ceased to exist, basically.
And we can't ignore that the person who is now talking about DEI being a problem, dismantling things at the Department of Justice and everything else, is talking about Derek Chauvin needs to be pardoned. Those things don't happen in a vacuum. They're all coming together for a reason, and we can't ignore it.
Until the Justice Department, until the White House, or Caroline Leavitt, the president's press secretary, says the president is considering this, I think this is a nothing burger. I think we can move on. Elon Musk tweets a lot of things. Do we debate that President Trump is now considering every single tweet that Elon Musk puts out on X every single day? Absolutely not. I think we should put that in that category and keep it moving.
And not speak up and say, hey, guys, this shouldn't happen. We don't have the right, or we shouldn't do that.
The White House isn't considering this. The Justice Department isn't considering this. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think anybody...
And you think it's a bad idea.
Okay, of course I think it's a bad idea.
And there you have it, y'all. No matter how you might feel about the death of George Floyd or the subsequent conviction of Derek Chauvin, no matter how you might feel about it, I don't think Donald Trump should get involved with it at all. This is something that preceded him. This is something that was used to manipulate the blackity blacks in the community, get them all stirred up, and y'all, they are erecting statues of a man who allegedly was a crackhead, a man who allegedly was a drug addict, and you're going to use him as a symbol and park his statue right next to MLK Jr., who has been a symbol in the community for generations? And you go put George Floyd next to that, and we know MLK wasn't no angel himself. Oh, that information is coming out, and it's going to be a whole bunch of butthurt in the community when y'all figure out what was really going on. The man came out in his latter years, and I said, I fear I have led my people into a burning house. Well, we think you did it on purpose. Some of us think you were paid to do it. Some of us think you were bought off to do it. But we're entitled to that opinion, and I digress. But here we are, y'all, with people trying to stir the pot. And it is unfortunate, y'all, that a Ben Shapiro couldn't find something better to talk about, couldn't find something better to do with his time than to opine on something like this. Boy, your people over there in the Middle East are under attack, under a constant attack. Focus on that. Keep your little pointy nose out the community. Because these folks ain't trying to hear what you're talking about, and you trying to drag Donald Trump into a no-win situation. If he pardons the man, it don't help him at all. If he don't pardon the man, it don't help him at all. So why would you pull his name into this conversation? Sound like you a hater, Ben Shapiro. Sound like you ain't MAGA, Ben Shapiro. And if you ain't MAGA, you ain't America first. And if you ain't America first, you might find problems over here around these parts. Yo, let me know what you think about this, about Ben Shapiro stepping out here, casting his aspersions on the community and saying Donald Trump should pardon Derek Chauvin, even though it wouldn't release him from prison. Talk to y'all all the time about symbolic gestures and how in the community we favor symbolism over substance and how that is a bad thing for us. Well, it's a bad thing for America. So when people like Ben Shapiro come out and start advocating for things that are bad for America, we should point them out just the same. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. I'd love to know your thoughts. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share the video so we can get more people involved in the conversation, y'all. And like I always say, always remember and never forget, without the gospel, it's just chops. Until next time, peace.